Okay.
Good morning,
our
everybody.
third episode of Coffee and Crits, where we are just going to talk about some role playing game aspects and how to do certain things, maybe give you guys some advice. Um, how are you today, Jacob?
Um, I'm very tired.
Yep, I feel that.
I'm not very awake right now, but it's good. Life's good.
Yeah,
Um,
take all of our advice with a grain of salt because it's also advice that we are giving at 11 o'clock in the morning.
that really should be some decent advice, but just
I
not
know.
for us.
That's very early for us.
um, yeah, just okay. I'm here. I got a cup of coffee in me. I think we're ready to go.
Are you sure about that?
I mean, no, not really, but it's good.
Okay.
It's good.
Good. Oh, good. Um, so we got more topics instead of questions this week. Most of them came from our friend Dark Brennan in our Discord. Um, our first one that he wanted some advice on is NPC creation, which is always a blast.
Speak for yourself. NPCs are hard to make.
They are freaking hard to make. It's like making a character, but you have to make 100 of them.
Right, and you have to make them all well balanced, and so.
And then they all have to make sense with their backstory and whatnot. And then,
So
yeah, they all have to be balanced, like you said, so they don't just murk your party.
So I did look into this a little bit because Darth Brennan gave us a little time on this question. And there's a couple different ways I found to tackle stuff like this. And the first one I found, though, is there's two different ways I see people make them. They either use a pre-existing stat block from a PC or an NPC out of the monster manual, or people will they'll build them like a character, but maybe limit some of their abilities because building a character gives an NPC an insane advantage because that's the purpose of the PCs is they're supposed to be able to take on 20 to 30 different characters at one time. So building them all as a playable character would easily null the abilities of the party. So I was trying to think of what I would do or how I would go about doing it because I always write up lots of character concepts for my NPCs, but typically we never make it to a point where they have to actually fight said NPC. So I think that I would probably I would look for a pre-existing stat block. I really liked that idea, and then just modifying it to the way that you think your character would act. So like if you have a wizard, look in and look at some of the wizard stat blocks, whether it be an elf or just like a high level sorcerer, anything like that. I think can make a big difference, and it kind of keeps you away from gaining all the abilities of a PC wizard for like this particular example. So, where was I going with that? You could do what's the word I'm looking for here? So, you could still pick out their spells and stuff. Like you don't have to copy the same spells that the stat block has to give your character individuality, but it still gives you that limited action economy and things like that. Or, it also if you're comparing to a high level wizard, they might have legendary action, stuff like that, that a PC won't have.
Yeah, definitely. It's much easier just to take a stat block and just change it to your NPC instead of trying to create your whole entirely own stat block. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Or I know we talked about last week, if you really especially if you're new, using a character sheet and making it like a character, and then just kind of transferring over the important information to a stat block, so it's compact and easy to look at and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good idea. Um, Look at us coming up with great ideas here at Coffee and Crits.
Right.
um, I think maybe like some other things you could look at is how, like when you're stat blocking them, make sure that it fits narratively. I think that's important too. So like if you know you're if you look at a wiz, I'm not sure about a wizard stat block, but I'll use this as my example
Mhm.
since that's what we've been using. Let's say they have a horrible charisma, but your wizard is very charismatic.
Mhm.
Maybe you move a couple of stats around, or
Yeah.
you can adjust them accordingly. But I mean, there's a reason they hire professionals to sit for years on end and
Mhm.
create stat blocks. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of time and that goes into it and learning how to do that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so I think that a lot of times, including myself, the hardest part about trying to create a stat block, if you don't really know the intricacies of it, is you're either going to make a character that's going to get slaughtered by the party or who is just going to absolutely slaughter your party.
Mhm.
And so then either the party's like, wow, that was really tough, and now all the characters are dead, or you're like, well, there's 7 hours of work down the drain in 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And so I just think that that's a really a hard. This is just a hard topic. They're not hard topic, but a hard thing to figure out how to do.
Mhm. No, and yeah, with the stats on that block, we talked about a lot with creating characters. Don't forget that those stats are how that character should act. So, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
with if you want your NPC to be very charismatic, but they have a 10 charisma, I mean, it just doesn't make sense, and your character, your players are going to question that. Or if they have a 4 intelligence and they're using all kinds of weird battle tactics, that's not going to make sense either. I mean, a 4 intelligence monster is just going to go in swinging and swing until they're dead. That's just, and we'll talk about that more with the battle tactics thing. But don't forget that those things do play a big part in how that character should act and how they do things and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of anything else I find really, really important. I just think that building NPCs is something that just takes a really long time to learn how to do, and it's all trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
There's not there's not a set method or a correct way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something you're passionate about and that's your favorite aspect of D&D, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe you spend more time on it. Myself personally, I I'm more of a I love to role play and develop characters. So I usually just use a stat block from the monster manual and modify it accordingly.
Well, and then because like with the roleplay thing, you also have to think about when you're creating NPCs. Don't just think about the stat block. Make your
Hmm.
NPCs interesting. Give them a backstory, just like your characters have. Don't just make them some evil person who's just being bad because they like to be bad. Give them a reason to be bad. Give them a reason to hate the party. Give them a reason to really like the party, or give the party a reason to really like them. You know what I mean? Like it's much more interesting if instead of just having a rage monster be your big bad, or even any um like boss level person in your campaign. Um, Instead of just doing that, make it something from one of the characters' pasts. Make their backstories intertwined, stuff like that. It's much more interesting and much more fun for the players when they meet a big bad evil guy or whatever, and they realize that it was their best friend the whole time, or they realize that they've met this character before and they used to trust them, or that one of them had a fight with them way back when 100 years ago. If they're both elves or something, they had a fight 100 years ago, and now this is just the revenge match for them. That stuff like that. NPCs are just, I mean, not just as important, because I mean D&D is about the characters, but especially with like the big bad evil persons like that, some NPCs can be just as important as the players,
Well, I
and
mean,
those are your players as the dungeon master. So that's your way of putting yourself, like your personality, into the game and how you want to play and stuff like that too. Because you don't get to play a cool character, you get to play all of the somewhat lame characters. So every once in a while, throw a cool one in there.
Absolutely. I think that that's really important to touch topic on because um, I think that, like, as a DM, it's easy to forget that you're also playing the game,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not just running the game for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. It's important that you have fun too.
And I lost my complete train of thought. I was sitting there like, yes, Kyle, keep telling them the good stuff. I've
It's
got a great response.
it's important that you're playing the game. That's where you stopped, so I don't have much else to go.
I was trying to go, I'm trying to think of what I was going to say. It's really a shame I forgot because I felt like it was very important to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know where I was going to go with it. It's okay
Uh
though.
huh.
Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Um, I don't think so. Just to make like just those few little things. Yeah, I think that's about it. Just make them interesting. Um, I mean, if you don't plan on your characters ever really fighting this person, don't even worry about giving them a stat block. Just give them a cool backstory and a cool thing to do or a cool thing to get the players to do, and that's all you really need. Not every single thing needs to have a stat block, especially if the characters aren't meant to fight it. And I know that there's always that chance that they will, just because you don't know what they're going to do. But then when that happens, just grab a random stat block out of the monster manual, throw that on them, and there you go. Um,
Hmm. Also, another really great tactic when it comes to making your character, if that does happen where you're not really planning on them being able to fight, make sure they have an escape plan, or
yes.
you as your the DM, your character has an escape plan,
Mm-hmm.
even if it is the cliche, he throws a smoke grenade and dips out into the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if that's what your character does, and that's what he does, or they, I just think that that's important because then it stops. There's a difference between like winging it and like just chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that an unplanned combat can easily go awry into chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not prepared for the combat, don't have the combat. You can have something interesting happen. Maybe they run away like that. Maybe some guards show up and try to stop them. That type of thing. Guards show up and take away the party. Guards show up and take away whatever your NPC is for starting a fight. I mean, there's plenty of ways to get out of combat if you're not prepared for combat.
Hmm.
And combat is not a fun thing to be in if you're not ready for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, if that's all we're gonna touch on NPC creation, our next one of my personal favorites, is character deaths. How do you do them the right way, and how do you not make it where your character just gets stabbed by a random goblin in the middle of the woods and dies?
When you say it's your favorite, are you saying because you enjoy killing the NPCs or you enjoy the memorable moment? Because it's a little scary there, Kyle.
It might be both.
Okay, cool. That's fine. Uh, it's all good.
I'll leave that up to the imagination.
So, character deaths, planned and unplanned. And I know some people say like deaths should never be planned. But if you've ever played a PC that you absolutely hate
Mm-hmm.
or you just don't enjoy, then sometimes making a character death is cooler than just writing them off, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like as a character in the campaign, they've earned something more than just you know what, I'm done with this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think character deaths are really, they're a part of the game. They need to be acknowledged and that they're a thing that happens. And I guess how to make them right is it just you I think as a DM you'll know when the right moment is, but some people struggle with that, and I think one thing you have to avoid, and or I guess would be not to avoid, is understanding how the creatures you're using would really interact in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um typically things with higher intelligence, after they see a character get knocked down, they're probably not going to just stand there and slaughter the unconscious PC. They're going to move on to something else. But um, watching some videos and reading some things, I also found it very interesting. There are a couple of DMs who say that, like, because you have to remember each round of combat is in 6 seconds. So if, let's say, a party is fighting a dragon and the dragon is going 1v1 against a fighter, why would if the fighter goes down on the first swing of their claws, would the dragon know that it went down, or would it continue to hit the dragon or hit the fighter? I mean, it's 6 seconds. They're going to be just slashing everywhere. And a lot of times if that happens, they go ahead and roll that extra attack against the downed player.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very interesting topic, or like discussion point. I really liked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always stuff and we can talk about that more in the battle tactics part. But definitely I don't know. I don't mind planned character deaths because I think those can be the most interesting ones. Especially like if a player hates their character, I'm not gonna make them play their character up to 20th level if they absolutely can't stand them. I think writing characters off can be kind of like I don't know, like, for lack of a better way of saying it, like a lazy way of doing it, to write them off. Just say, oh, they're gone, they walked away, they don't want to do this anymore. When this is a role-playing game, you're telling a story, every story has people die. Every story has those meaningful moments where a character dies and the main character has to deal with something happening to one of their best friends or their mentors, that type of thing. That's what makes characters and stories good characters, is when they have to deal with that kind of trauma and that kind of thing happening. And if you plan it, I mean, like, maybe plan like that. Like, I'll talk to a player and be like, if you don't like your character, we can kill them, write them off. What do you want to do? And I'll ask the player what they want to do. And if they want to kill them, I'll say, okay, I might not tell them when, I might not do any of that, but I'll be like, okay, then in the next couple sessions, we'll figure out a way to make that happen. And then I, as a DM, I can write a meaningful character death that works well with the rest of the party and all of those relationships within the party. Because that does, it creates really good role-playing moments where the rest of the party has to think about how their character would react to their best friend dying, their mentor dying, that type of thing. And I think, like, because role-playing games are just telling a story, and if that helps further the story, if that helps better develop the character, then who cares if it's planned? It's just good storytelling then, and that's what we're doing when we're playing role-playing games, so why not? The only characters that I have ever killed, both of them have been planned before I actually did it. They weren't planned like when I would do it or how I would do it, but both of those players came up to me and said, I don't like playing this character anymore, I want to play something new. And so we killed them off. And both of those moments were really good moments for the whole party, and they're both moments, one of them was more recent, but one was, 10 sessions ago? Maybe more. And the party still talks about it. The party still will be walking around, and something will happen, and they'll remember what happened, and it's still a good role-playing moment for the party. They still mention it. They still let it, like, not control, but let it, like, make their decisions a little bit differently, that type of thing. It definitely has made the story much more interesting in that campaign.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think as a member of said campaign, it's very interesting, and losing important members is always tough. But there's also some campaigns I played before Kyle and I started playing together. I played in a campaign with a group of friends. There were 9 of us in this campaign. And by the time we stopped playing together, just because, life happens, I think 2 of us were the only ones with original party members, and some people were on their third and fourth characters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was over, like I said, a year and a half. So not all of those were ever planned. Like, some people do, like you said, they get tired of playing the same character, but there were times that, um, we'd be playing, and one that I found very interesting was it was like a ghast or something. No, not a ghast. It was some type of specter. It literally sapped the strength out of a character until it killed him. And so like those aren't things that you think
Mm-hmm.
are like planned, and it wasn't planned. And it still though was meaningful because it was in the midst of combat, which, obviously that's where all player characters die. They don't die in role playing moments
Mm-hmm.
typically. But it was just that none of us who had the ability to save that person could get there.
Mm-hmm.
There was just so much going on. It was like a huge deadly encounter. We were getting closer to one of the big bads in a particular arc, and they were down on the ground, and there was nothing that we could do about it. There wasn't there was no amount of dodge that a rogue could take,
Mm-hmm.
or the amount of opportunity attacks at this point that a cleric could just take to run over and try to heal them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because they were like, oh well, what about healing word, because it's such a great spell, but they were up on top of a building, like the upper story, and so they couldn't see them. It was very, those kind of moments to us, it seemed like, it felt like it was a collective effort that character died. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just the DM, targeting that character. I don't think that was
Mm-hmm.
the purpose of it. I think it was just unfortunate that none of us were able to get up there to save him.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't high enough level at the point to, to resurrect or take them somewhere to have them resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
And so that resulted in a new character, but that was something we always discussed. We were fairly new when it happened, so we changed the way that we fought in combat. Like
Mm-hmm.
we used that focal point to really understand the rules better, which is, they say like, well, you should have read the rules in the beginning, but as you're learning to play a game, you start to remember more rules, and it really shaped the way that we understood to do combat. I believe the character that we lost was a bard.
Mm-hmm.
So more than likely a bard probably shouldn't have been going toe to toe by himself upstairs against a ghost
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. And so it just really shaped how we looked at things going forward. So I think that there's a way to even use surprise character deaths
Oh yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
that are important.
Yeah. No, yeah, not all character deaths need to be planned or anything like that, but yeah, definitely. As long as like we want to talk about how to make it meaningful, as long as it isn't completely unmeaningful. Yeah, like
Yeah.
if it can show the party that their tactics aren't the greatest and they need to work on them, then I mean, that's fine, because then they learn from their mistakes. As long as they learn something, it's not just like a wasted character death. It's not just you being an asshole DM killing somebody.
And there's the other part of this question I really wanted to talk on. I think we've done a really good job talking about making them meaningful and how to do them right.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of an NP or a character death that I think we should talk about is the reaction of the player who loses a character.
Mm-hmm.
Because you never know how they're going to take it. Obviously, with a planned one, they're not going to be upset. Or, well, they might be upset, but it's like upset because they invested the time, but they're going to be okay with it because they're getting to play a new character that they've developed.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, like for an unplanned death, they may not take it that well. They might be upset. They might be angry, and they're entitled to all of those feelings. As long as they understand that it's not the DM singling out a particular person and having them lose their character because they feel targeted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best way, and I've watched a bunch of people on this to try to form my own idea of how I should handle these kinds of things, If a character dies at the beginning of a session, or not beginning, I'm sorry, like in the middle of the session, there's no reason to call that session short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not fair to
Um,
the other players at the table.
um, so what I think you should do is you should always have like an extra character sheet or something ready to go and hand that to them and say, okay, give them a couple minutes. Maybe you guys take a break or something. And if the person playing wants to talk about it, then have that like little 15 to 20-minute conversation. And then if they want to talk more about it, just tell them, hey, at the end of the session, we'll talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then hand them that character sheet and like don't do it like in like an ass way, like hey, here's a new character, and be like, hey, think of a character, go start building them, and then whenever, as long as you have, it was like develop the backstory later, just have them come in at the same level the rest of the party is, and get them back into the game as fast as you can,
Mm-hmm.
because like they're there to play and hang out with their friends. So them sitting over in a corner making a new character because theirs died sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just get the stat block and the weapons and a name,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're pretty good to finish out a session, and then let them flesh out that backstory for the next session whenever you play again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then another thing on like if it is a surprise character death, don't be that DM that they die in the middle of combat, they roll their third death saving throw and they fail. They're dead now. Don't at the end of combat, don't just be like, all right, and your friend's dead and let's continue. Let them have that last moment. I mean, just because they rolled their last death saving throw 6 rounds ago in the middle of combat, give them that moment where they're laying on the ground and they're trying to hold back tears and they're sputtering and they can hardly talk, they can't move. Let them have that moment with the other characters to like you know what I mean, get like some closure with the party. Cuz that can like, even if it's just a random death that you weren't planning in the middle of combat, that can make it meaningful too, that they can say their last words to who's ever important to them and stuff like that. I just think that's a really good like way of doing it if it is like an accident, just because then it still feels meaningful. I mean, because nobody wants to go fight up against a bunch of goblins and just have like a bad rolling session, have some bad battle tactics, and somebody gets murked by some goblins, and then at the end of combat, you're like, oh, your character's dead, they're dead. What do you guys do? Nobody
Absolutely.
wants that moment. Let them be like, all right, combat's over, the goblins are dead, but you look over and you see your best friend laying on the ground. They're sputtering, they can hardly move. What do? Um, Obviously, like, they've rolled their death saving throw, healing magic won't work, but let them run over there. Let them just have that moment with them.
Absolutely. I really like that one. And I just think that it's important. Or another thing I've always really liked is, and I've seen a couple people talk about it, is whenever that character does go down and for like they roll their last death save, they take a second to really act out the scene of each other PC
Mm-hmm.
noticing that the character is falling. Not in a sense that they're laying on the ground already and they all see them stop breathing, because I don't think that's realistic. But when that last death save hits, maybe that's when, amongst the killing blow of a sneak attack, and the orc drops down to their knees, and the elf rogue standing there sees their fighter impaled by one of the big bads on their knees, falling to the ground, and that's where they. I just think that those kinds of things make for really great moments that are memorable to the party,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's a great way to also let each of the characters have that moment during combat, and I think it cushions the blow a bit,
Mm-hmm.
because then I feel like the person playing that character remembers, or at least feels like their character was loved by each individual character, regardless of what arguments may have occurred in the previous sessions in roleplay. I've always liked that, and I always try to incorporate that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And then we can segue that into our last topic, which is battle tactics and how to make your encounters not boring, not just, I'm going to roll a d20, I swing my sword. Oh, I missed. All right, it's your turn. Oh, I'm going to shoot firebolt for the third time. Oh, I missed. Okay, it's your turn. Oh, I'm going to cast Sacred Flame. Oh, they failed to save. Okay, they take 4 damage. Like, how to make it interesting.
I just let all of the NPCs auto crit. That makes it interesting to me.
That's one battle tactic.
I mean, come on. When even a goblin can put out 15 damage, you got to think about something.
You're doing something wrong.
No,
As a party, you really need to rethink your tactics.
Yeah, no. I think this is something I was actually just talking to you about last night.
Mhm.
We try to answer these questions individually so we can bring both of our viewpoints together. But this one I really struggle with because I've been DMing for a couple of years now, and I still have this problem of how do I build a a proper encounter that seems meaningful, but also is not too much. It doesn't just overwhelm the party. I want every once in a while, I want the party to feel like, oh my God, are we all going to die here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make it words. I don't know.
I use the word meaningful, but I don't want to say that as in meaningful, as in like, I want it to happen. Yeah, I want it.
Make them
I want
nervous a little bit.
Yes,
Make them
because
think.
because even if like, so I feel like our parties that we have here at Saving Throws, they do a very good job of interacting together, I think, for the most part, and learning and fighting together as a team
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Sometimes.
And when they do,
We've gotten better over time.
absolutely. um, so like when you guys do, especially like with our Descent group, our first encounter versus where you guys are right now has gone so far. Um, and I just think what I want is I want the same, I don't want to say fear, but the same emotion that was associated with a level 1 fight
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, oh God, I have 6 hit points.
Yeah.
Please don't touch me.
Mm-hmm.
And so with, 58 to 100 hit points in this like mid-tier point, I want someone to go, they just did 18 damage to me.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't touch me again.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to do that is understanding what each of your non-player characters do mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked about this in what was it, week 1 or was it last week when we talked about prepping?
Last week.
Was it last week? Okay, so this reiterates prepping. Like I said, so when I'm prepping an encounter, I always prepare more than when I'm going to role play, because there's going to be key moments whenever a particular character might have an area of effect spell that targets the whole party, even though he's being beat down. One character might be more susceptible to a different damage from a minion than another. For example, you probably are not going to use fire-based attacks against a tiefling. And so I think that understanding what each of your monsters does and how they would fight in combat is really, really important.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. To stop and think about what your monsters can do, because just like you want to, like, make the party a little bit nervous so that they do think of those tactics, so they stop and say, should I be doing this right now? How can how can what I do benefit what the next player does? How can what I do benefit 3 rounds from now when this player might be able to do this, that type of thing. Make them strategize. That's the word I'm looking for. Strategy. Found it.
That's a good word.
Anyway, just like the PC should be doing that, the NPCs should be doing that too. Especially if they are intelligent humanoidish creatures. If they have an intelligence above like a 10, maybe even like an 8, they're smart enough to know at least basic battle tactics where they're not just going to run in and start fighting, and like as they start to get beat, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. Because they do, like, these creatures are like, they're in D&D, they're bred to fight. That's what they do. So they know what to do. If you're fighting a bunch of goblins, they're all going to do what goblins do best. They're going to do like the sneak stuff where they try and sneak in, get somebody, get away, that type of thing. And then like if they're like a pack type creature, as soon as they get below half of their pack, they're going to run away. Like you have to think of stuff like that. Not every encounter just needs to be a fight to the death between the PCs and the NPCs.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. Because you just want to make it relevant. You want to, yeah, you want to have the good strategy, as Kyle said. I'm trying to think of some other really important things about battle tactics, like, so another thing you can do is, and everyone, like, I think most DMs know this, but new people probably don't, is action economy is key to making a balanced fight. Whenever you get to that upper level combat, each character is probably going to do 2 to 3 things per turn, where a level 1 fighter fighting an orc is going to be balanced, but a level 5 fighter fighting an orc, that orc didn't skill up, it's still just an orc. So that's where you have to figure out what makes that orc competitive against the level 5 fighter. And that doesn't mean add abilities to the orc, because then you're going to start making things unbalanced. But maybe if you weren't using, let's say, like, I think orcs have relentless attack. Maybe you don't use that on a first level fighter. So then when they get there to fight them, you might have one of them unleash a relentless attack. And so then now they have to change. And so it just switches things up. And I think it makes them more important.
Or switch things up in the middle of combat. I mean, creatures can call for backup. So now the party beats them down halfway and they're like, oh, they're almost gone. We got this. And then all of a sudden the leader yells out a bellowing scream, and 6 more come out of the shadows, and now they have twice as many to fight. Now they have to change all of their strategies because they're beat down, and now they have to fight 6 brand new creatures.
Absolutely.
Have them run away and go hide, but when they go hide, the party follows them to finish them off. They've set up a trap. They were ready to do that, so they ran and hid behind the trap, and now the party gets trapped. What else could you do? Like, if you're fighting, like, wizards and stuff like that, they're not just going to run into the middle of combat. They're going to stay far away, and if they start to get too low, they're going to Misty Step away. They're going to Dimension Door away. They're going to disappear. You have to just think, creatures, especially intelligible creatures, they're not just there to beat on the party and then die. They're there to beat the party, and if they're like a wizard or something, they're going to learn the party's strategy, and then they're going to go away. And then a couple sessions later, they can come back, and now they're more prepared because they've fought this party before. They know exactly what they do. It keeps encounters interesting, and it makes the party think on their toes a little bit more, because if they do fight a wizard in session 2, and that wizard gets away, in session 27, that wizard shows up again. That wizard knows exactly how this party fights, and they know that they're stronger now. So now that wizard's going to be stronger and know how to deal with it. And that's a big thing with, like, NPC creation too, where they all just go together, where your NPCs, they don't level up, but they do get stronger just like the party does if they are to meet them again. All of that stuff happens with NPCs too. An NPC wizard at first level isn't going to be the same NPC wizard when the party is 16th level. That wizard's trained and gotten better too, and stuff like that. And that's just stuff to think about that you can make it interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much nailed that one in the coffin there, buddy.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
Just gotta get this book and read it. It helps a lot.
It's a great book.
Do it. Do the thing.
I'm trying to think of, like, any last little topic discussion things about this. I think another really great point just to make with the battle tactics, setting up the encounter itself. Think about like what would be relevant. Would a if you're gonna have a big like hulking monster, they're probably not going to come with a bunch of other little creatures with them. They might bring one or two, but I would imagine a wizard does not want to get into combat, so would probably bring several either like acolytes or scholars or something of that nature to help defend him so he can get his spells off, and they're the cannon fodder that they have to get through. I think that understanding your character's type will help you build a better encounter.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where their stats again come into play, where an intelligence 10 creature is going to have more battle tactics, whereas an intelligence 3 creature is just going to run in and swing until they're dead. That's just what they do. A high charisma character could, instead of fighting, try to persuade the party into doing something different or try to get out of it. Stuff like that. You just have to look at those things on the stat block. Those things are just as important as all the abilities that they have.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I don't really know if there's really much else to talk about. I think that those are some really great points to hit on when developing said tactics.
Yeah. Well then, if that's it, we can say goodbye. Jake, you want to do some shout outs?
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Jacob Uten. As you guys can see on the overlay, I play Roman Straussen in our Tomb of Annihilation campaign, and I also play Basila Mila in our Star Wars campaign. You can find me at all of my social media at JakeTheBard_, and you can come hang out with me when I play video games on my channel. I just started doing a playthrough of Pokemon Sword, so if you want to hang out and talk about anything like that, anything D&D related, go ahead and just hop on over when I'm live. I think that pretty much sums it up, and I think the next thing we're doing is playing on Tuesday, right? But I'll let you get into that more, Kyle.
Oh, yeah. I'm Kyle. I'm Winking Wizard on all social medias. Be sure to follow me and Saving Throws on all those social medias so you don't miss any of our cool stuff. We have Descent and Tomb and Star Wars and Harry Potter coming up and a whole bunch of other stuff coming up you don't want to miss. That is one thing this week instead of on Wednesday, which is when we usually play Tomb. We're doing it on Tuesday. It'll still be at 6, but just don't miss it. Be sure to follow us. Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. Well, I guess that's it then.
Cool. Bye, guys.
See ya.